University researchers set up a controlled trial in the Midwest. Two identical plots of land, same soil, same climate, same water access. One was planted the way virtually every commercial farm in America plants, a single crop, evenly spaced, managed with synthetic inputs. The other was planted with no fertilizer, no pesticides, no machinery, and no cost. At the end of the growing season, the second plot produced more food per square foot. Not slightly more, measurably, consistently, reproducibly more. And this was not a one-time result. The same outcome has been recorded across trials in Europe, Sub-Saharan Africa, Southeast Asia, and Latin America. So the question isn't whether this method works, the data has settled that. The question is why every industrial farm in the world is still doing the opposite. The method is called polyculture, and the specific version of it that keeps outperforming modern agriculture in controlled studies is one that predates written history. To understand why polyculture works, you first need to understand what monoculture actually does to land. Modern industrial agriculture is built almost entirely on the monoculture model, the practice of growing a single crop species across a large area season after season. The logic is straightforward. A single crop allows for standardized planting equipment, standardized harvesting equipment, and standardized chemical inputs. Everything is optimized for one outcome, and that optimization makes the system fast, scalable, and profitable at industrial volumes. But that efficiency comes with a cost that doesn't show up on the quarterly balance sheet. Soil is not an inert growing medium. It is a living system. A healthy teaspoon of agricultural soil contains more microorganisms than there are people on Earth. Bacteria, fungi, protozoa, nematodes, and a network of mycorrhizal threads that move water and nutrients between plant root systems. This underground ecosystem is what makes soil productive, and it evolved over millions of years in environments where dozens of plant species were growing simultaneously, each one contributing a different root architecture, a different chemical signature, and a different set of organic compounds back into the ground when it died. When you remove that diversity and replace it with a single species planted in identical rows, managed with herbicides that kill everything else, you are not farming soil, you are farming a substrate. And substrates need to be fed externally because they cannot feed themselves. This is why industrial agriculture consumes roughly 180 million tons of synthetic fertilizer every single year. Not because crops need synthetic fertilizer to grow, but because the soil has lost the biological infrastructure that used to supply nutrients for free. Polyculture doesn't fix this problem by adding something, it fixes it by stopping the destruction. The practice of growing multiple crops together in a single space is not a modern discovery. It is the oldest agricultural system on Earth, and it was being refined and optimized by farming communities long before the first plow was manufactured. The most well-documented example comes from pre-Columbian Mesoamerica, where indigenous farmers across what is now Mexico and the American Southwest developed an intercropping system that researchers would later call the Three Sisters. The three crops were corn, beans, and squash, and the combination was not accidental. Corn grows vertically, creating a tall central stalk that serves as a natural trellis. Beans are nitrogen-fixing legumes, meaning their root systems host bacteria that convert atmospheric nitrogen into a bioavailable form that fertilizes the surrounding soil. Squash spreads low along the ground, creating a dense canopy of large leaves that shades the soil, suppresses weed growth, and reduces moisture evaporation. Each plant benefits the others. The corn feeds the beans a structure to climb. The beans feed the corn and squash the nitrogen they need to grow. The squash protects the shared root zone from heat, drought, and competing plants. The system requires no fertilizer because it generates its own. It requires no herbicides because the ground cover retains soil moisture. And it produces 3 nutritionally complementary food crops simultaneously from the same square footage that an industrial operation would dedicate to one. This system fed civilizations across the Americas for thousands of years. It was so productive and so stable that when European settlers first arrived and observed indigenous agricultural plots, many of them reported being unable to identify the fields as farms at all, because the diversity and density of the planting looked nothing like the stripped, ordered rows they were accustomed to. The Three Sisters is the most famous example, but it was never an isolated practice. In West Africa, farmers developed a system called intercropping sorghum and cowpea that used the same nitrogen-fixing logic. In the rice paddies of Southeast Asia, farmers maintained fish, ducks, and multiple crop varieties within the same flooded fields simultaneously. The fish and ducks managing pests and providing fertilizer, while the crop diversity stabilized yields against disease and weather variation. In the Andean highlands, communities cultivated over 3,000 varieties of potato across different altitudes and microclimates, not because they lacked the organization to standardize, but because they understood that diversity it was itself a form of resilience. What all of these systems shared was an understanding developed through generations of direct observation that a field is not a factory floor. It is an ecosystem, and ecosystems produce more when they are managed as systems rather than dismantled into components. Modern ecology has a term for this. It is called the over-yielding effect, and in the last 40 years it has been documented repeatedly in controlled research settings. The data on polyculture performance is substantial, and it consistently points in the same direction. A landmark meta-analysis published in Science evaluated 226 separate studies comparing biodiversity and ecosystem productivity. The conclusion was unambiguous. Plots with higher plant diversity consistently outproduced monoculture controls, and the productivity advantage increased over time as the soil ecosystem recovered and stabilized. A study from the University of Michigan analyzed 286 agricultural projects across 57 countries that had shifted from conventional monoculture to diversified polyculture systems. Average yield increases of 79% were recorded. In sub-Saharan Africa specifically, where synthetic fertilizer access is limited and soil degradation is severe, the yield advantage exceeded 100% in multiple cases. Research published in Nature Plants examined long-term intercropping trials in China and found that wheat and maize grown together in alternating strips consistently produced 20 to 40% more combined yield than either crop grown in an equivalent monoculture area. The researchers identified the mechanism as complementary resource use. The two crops accessed different soil depths, utilized sunlight at different times of day, and released different chemical compounds that suppressed shared pest populations. And at the landscape scale, a study from Wageningen University in the Netherlands monitored 6,000 farms across 22 countries over multiple growing seasons. Their conclusion? Diversified farming systems produced yields comparable to or exceeding monoculture in 71% of cases, while simultaneously reducing synthetic input costs by an average of 22%. These are not fringe results. This is a consistent pattern across independent institutions, multiple continents, and decades of controlled research. But the data has not translated into widespread adoption, and the reasons for that are worth understanding because they reveal something important about why agricultural systems change slowly even when the evidence is clear. The first barrier is mechanization. Industrial monoculture was optimized from the beginning for machine planting and machine harvesting. A corn harvester is engineered for uniform rows of identical height plants with predictable spacing. A polyculture field, by design, contains plants of different heights, different growth rates, and different spatial arrangements. Existing harvesting equipment cannot process it efficiently. Transitioning to a polyculture system at industrial scale would require either a complete rethinking of harvesting equipment or a return to more labor-intensive methods, both of which represent significant capital disruption for large farming operations. The second barrier is the subsidy structure. In the United States, farm subsidies are disproportionately directed toward commodity monocultures, primarily corn, soy, wheat, and cotton. A farmer who diversifies out of those crops loses access to the financial safety net that makes those crops viable in a bad year. The subsidy system was not designed to obstruct polyculture, but the effect is the same. The third barrier is knowledge transfer. Polyculture systems are highly site-specific. The optimal companion planting combinations depend on local soil conditions, pest pressures, rainfall patterns, and the specific varieties being grown. Industrial agriculture succeeded partly because it could be packaged into a universal set of instructions: plant this seed, apply this input, harvest at this interval. Polyculture requires observation, adaptation, and a working understanding of plant relationships that takes time to develop. None of these barriers mean the system doesn't work. They explain why it hasn't scaled industrially. For the small-scale grower, homesteader, or market gardener, none of these barriers apply. For anyone growing food at the scale of a backyard, a market garden, or a small farm, implementing a polyculture system requires no capital investment, no new equipment, and no purchased inputs. The starting point is understanding plant relationships. Not every combination of crops produces a benefit. Some plants compete for the same root zone, emit compounds that suppress neighboring species, or attract pests that damage adjacent plantings. Effective polyculture design begins with identifying combinations that have documented mutualistic relationships. Beyond the three sisters, several companion pairings have strong research backing. Tomatoes and basil, as noted, show consistent pest suppression benefits. Carrots and onions are a well-documented pairing. The onion's sulfur compounds repel the carrot fly, while the carrot's root structure loosens soil around the onion's base. Brassicas paired with aromatic herbs like dill, cilantro, or chamomile attract parasitic wasps that prey on the caterpillars and aphids that damage cabbage family crops. Legumes, beans, peas, clover, fix nitrogen and benefit any nitrogen-hungry neighbor planted nearby: corn, squash, leafy greens, or brassicas. The second consideration is vertical layering. A productive polyculture plot uses the full vertical range of the available space. Tall crops like corn, sunflowers, or pole beans occupy the upper canopy. Mid-height crops like tomatoes, peppers, or kale occupy the middle layer, and low-growing crops like lettuce, spinach, or herbs occupy the ground level. And root crops occupy the subsurface layer entirely, competing with almost nothing above them. A well-layered plot is using every inch of sunlight, every layer of soil, and every segment of the root zone simultaneously, which is precisely why it outproduces a single-species plot of the same area. The third consideration is succession planting. In a monoculture system, a plot produces for one season and then sits empty. In a polyculture system, fast-maturing crops like radishes and lettuce are planted in gaps between slower-maturing crops. As the fast crops are harvested, the space they occupied is filled by the expanding canopy of the longer-season crops. The ground is never bare, which means the soil ecosystem is never disrupted, moisture is never unprotected, and the plot is producing food across a longer window of the season. The practical implementation requires nothing more than seeds, existing soil, and time. In the first season, expect a learning curve. Spacing relationships take observation to calibrate. Some pairings will perform better than expected, some will need adjustment. By the second season, the soil biology will begin to recover, root networks will be established, and the system will require noticeably less intervention. By the third season, a well-managed polyculture plot typically requires no added fertilizer, minimal pest intervention, and substantially less watering than the equivalent monoculture plot, because the system has rebuilt the biological infrastructure that industrial agriculture spent decades removing. The honest caveat here is that polyculture is not a substitute for every farming context. At the scale of thousands of acres, growing commodity crops for industrial supply chains, the mechanization and standardization constraints are real. Polyculture will not replace industrial corn next season. But that was never the relevant question for most people watching this. The relevant question is whether a household, a small farm, or a community growing operation can produce more food from the same land at lower cost, with less chemical input, and with less water consumption. On that question, the data is settled. The method that does it most consistently is the one that has been doing it for thousands of years, and it costs nothing to start. A lot of what this channel covers has been sidelined not because it doesn't work, but because it doesn't generate the kind of ongoing purchase cycle that keeps an industry funded. Polyculture produces its own fertility, manages its own pests, and retains its own moisture. There is nothing to sell, and that, more than any agronomic limitation, is why you haven't heard more about it. If that's the kind of story that matters to you, subscribing and sharing is the simplest way to make sure it keeps being found. And if you want to see how these same principles of working with natural systems instead of against them apply to water harvesting, then you need to watch our video on the ancient fog collection system that's still outperforming modern irrigation right here.